The phone rang. It was an old rotary model, ivory-colored, with a frayed cord that had long since curled into permanent spirals. It sat on a table in the hallway of the Taylor home in Silver Lake, Los Angeles, a table no one had dared move in 18 years. Dust had settled around it like a moat, and the receiver hadn't been lifted in over a decade. But on the morning of the 29th of September, 2005, at exactly 6:13 a.m., the phone rang. Once, twice. And then again. Lisa Taylor stood frozen in the kitchen, holding a coffee mug she hadn't yet sipped from. Her knees buckled before her thoughts could catch up. She hadn't heard that sound in years. Not since the morning Jennifer disappeared. That phone had belonged to her sister. Jennifer Taylor vanished without a trace in November of 1987. A Monday night. She was 27, a part-time art teacher and freelance illustrator. She loved old movies, had a sweet tooth for lemon bars, and used to walk everywhere with a spiral sketchbook tucked under one arm. She lived alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment 2 blocks from Echo Park. She had a cat named Marbles, and an answering machine that played Moon River as the tone. Jennifer was the kind of person who wrote birthday cards 2 weeks early, and called her mother every Sunday at 6 p.m., without fail. On the night she disappeared, Jennifer had been at a friend's engagement party in Los Feliz. It wasn't her usual crowd, but she went anyway, said she could use the air. She left the party around 10:30 p.m., told a friend she'd walk home. It was a clear night. No reports of trouble, no sightings after she stepped out the door. She never made it home. Her apartment was untouched. The keys were still in her purse, which had been found sitting on the passenger seat of her locked car parked a mile away in a part of town she had no known reason to be. Her cat was unfed. The sketchbook was missing. But her phone, her old landline, remained where it always was. And in the weeks, months, and eventually years that followed, Lisa never disconnected it. She couldn't, somehow she felt. If Jennifer ever needed to reach out, that would be the way. At first, people called often. Neighbors, detectives, reporters. Tips came in sightings from bus stations, blurry photos in New Mexico, letters with no return address. But none of them were her. The years wore down the optimism. Her parents aged quietly. Her mother died in 1999, and Lisa stayed in the house, alone, listening to that silent phone like it might someday breathe again. And now, 18 years later, it had rung. Lisa stared at it, her heart pounding. She stepped closer, cautiously, as though approaching something living. The phone rang a 4th time, a 5th. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the receiver. She picked it up. Silence. Not static, not a voice. Just the kind of silence that fills a theater just before the curtains draw. A silence that waits. Lisa whispered, "Hello?" A click. Then the line went dead. She stood there, holding the receiver to her ear, long after the dial tone returned. And when she finally set it down, the hallway seemed different, as though something had passed through. That was the moment Lisa knew. Jennifer's story wasn't finished. Jennifer's disappearance in 1987 had never been classified as a homicide. There had been no body, no blood, no crime scene. LAPD treated it as a missing persons case, one of thousands filed that year. In a city like Los Angeles, a young woman vanishing could mean anything. She could have left by choice, run from something, someone, or worse. But without evidence, it sat in a file cabinet, aging alongside the photos taped to the case folder. Faded Polaroids. Her DMV license. A high school yearbook photo, with Best Smile under her name. The lead detective at the time had retired in 1993. By 2005, only one officer in the department even remembered the case, and barely. Lisa, however, had never stopped remembering. After that phone call, she pulled out everything. The binder she'd kept since 1987, the boxes in the garage, the newspaper clippings, the voice recordings, the sketches Jennifer had mailed her weeks before she vanished. She lined them up on the kitchen table like a museum exhibit. She played the message Jennifer had left on her answering machine 2 days before the disappearance. It was cheerful, nothing out of the ordinary. "Hey, Liz, don't forget we're going to that antique shop on Saturday." They've got those weird perfume bottles you like. I'll call you Friday night. Love you." She never did. But now somehow, someone had her number, or her phone, or something more terrifying. Lisa tried to call back the number, but the call had come through an unknown line. No caller ID. The landline had no log. It was as though it never happened. She filed a report the next day, walking into the same police station she'd visited 2 decades ago. She expected the same dismissal. But this time someone listened. Officer Mia Sandoval had just transferred to Missing Persons. Young, patient, curious. She took Lisa seriously not because she believed the call meant Jennifer was alive, but because it was odd. "To specific. To eerie." "Phones don't just ring themselves," Mia said, scanning the records. "And that number hasn't been used since 1999. But the line was still active. Lisa paid the bill every year. They tried tracing the call. Nothing. No signal log, no rerouting, no external source. But that was impossible. Everything left a trace. Unless someone didn't want to be found. That same week, Lisa received a manila envelope in the mailbox. No return address. Inside, a photograph. It was blurry, sun-bleached, grainy, like something from the 1980s. It showed a stretch of desert, empty, flat. But in the bottom right corner, a reflection. A piece of chrome. And next to it, what looked like the hem of a skirt. White with small embroidered roses. Jennifer had owned a dress just like that. Lisa brought it to Officer Sandoval. The image had no timestamp, no markings. But the photo paper was from a discontinued brand, developed in the early 90s. "Where did this come from?" Mia asked. Lisa shook her head. "I don't know." MZ. That was when the question started to spiral. Was the phone call a warning? Was the photo a message? Had Jennifer been alive all these years? Or had someone kept something hidden for 18 years until now? Lisa didn't know it yet, but that single unanswered call would lead her down a path that would unravel a secret buried for nearly 2 decades. Something was stirring, and someone was watching. Because later that same week, when Lisa returned home from the grocery store, her front door was ajar. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing had been touched. Except the phone. The receiver was off the hook. And a new message was on the machine. The tape clicked. Lisa stared at the answering machine, its red LED blinking in slow, deliberate rhythm. She hadn't seen it blink since the mid-90s. Her breath caught in her throat. She pressed play. The voice that emerged was faint, distorted as though recorded from a distance or whispered into fabric, but it was undeniably familiar. Just 4 words. "You were always right." Then silence. No name, no date, no explanation, just that voice. Lisa replayed it again and again, standing in the middle of her kitchen, heart pounding until the machine's plastic buttons grew warm beneath her fingertips. The cadence, the softness, it sounded like Jennifer, or what Jennifer might sound like after all these years. She took the tape to the station the next morning. Officer Sandoval listened to it 3 times before looking up. "We'll get it analyzed," she said carefully. "But I need to ask, has anyone else had access to your house?" Lisa shook her head. "No one. I live alone." "What about a key? Family, friends, exes?" "No one," Lisa said again. "Not since Jennifer." Sandoval submitted the tape for forensic audio analysis. It would take time. But in the meantime, something about the photograph wouldn't let her go the hem of the dress, the glint of chrome. She sent it to an LAPD analyst who specialized in geographic imagery. 2 days later, the analyst called her. "There's something off about the photo," he said. "The shadows, the terrain. It doesn't look like Southern California. I think it might be Nevada, near the Amargosa Valley." "Oh?" Sandoval drove out to Lisa's house that afternoon, photograph in hand, and slid it across the table. "Would Jennifer have had any reason to go to Nevada?" she asked. Lisa's brow furrowed. "Number. She hated the desert. Said it made her feel like the earth had stopped breathing." But that word Amargosa unlocked something. A faint memory, tucked deep into the back of her mind. Jennifer's last sketchbook. The one that had never been found. She had taken it with her to the party the night she disappeared. But a week before that, Jennifer had shown Lisa a charcoal drawing of a gas station in the middle of nowhere, sitting beneath a half-lit sign that read, "Last exit before silence." Lisa remembered the caption Jennifer had scribbled at the bottom in red ink. "We are always closer to nowhere than we think." Meanwhile, Officer Sandoval began combing through the old case files. She found something odd. A witness report from 1987 that had never been followed up. A woman named Beatrice Hill had called in 2 days after Jennifer's disappearance. She worked the night shift at a roadside diner near Barstow, off the I-15. Said she saw a young woman matching Jennifer's description sitting at the counter around 2 a.m. the night she vanished. The woman was wearing a white dress with roses and kept sketching in a notebook. Ordered lemon pea. Didn't speak. Beatrice said the woman left with a man in a dark red pickup. She never saw them again. The original detective had marked the tip as unverified. No follow-up, no visit to the diner, no interview with Beatrice. It was a dead end that had been left to die. But Sandoval tracked down Beatrice, now retired, living in Palm Springs. She remembered the night vividly. It was quiet, she said. One of those desert nights where the sky is so black it swallows you. She walked in alone. Looked like she was coming from somewhere, not going to it. "And the man?" Sandoval asked. Late 30s. Cowboy boots. Didn't order anything. Just stood at the door watching her. When she got up, he followed. I thought it was her boyfriend. But she looked scared. Sandoval's stomach turned. "Why didn't you say that before?" "I did," Beatrice said. But no one ever asked. Back in Los Angeles, Lisa received another envelope. This time it wasn't left in her mailbox. It was tucked between the screen and the front door, placed deliberately. She found it at 6:13 a.m., exactly the same time the phone had rung 1 week earlier. Inside, a single Polaroid photo. It showed a hand. Thin, pale, holding a small object. Jennifer's old sketchbook. The cover had been burned along the edge, but the initials J.T. were still visible. The photo was taken indoors. The background was dark wood, almost cabin-like. A coil of thick rope lay beside the hand, and just barely in frame, a reflection. A fragment of a mirror showing part of a face. Not Jennifer's probably a man's. Lisa collapsed into the couch, clutching the photo like a relic. This wasn't just a cruel prank. Someone had the sketchbook. Someone had been watching. Someone was trying to say something. Sandoval took the photo to forensics. It was dated using the chemical breakdown of the instant film developed within the last 6 months. The sketchbook hadn't been hidden all these years. It was still in use, still being moved. They traced the type of wood paneling in the background to a specific style of prefabricated cabins built in the late 1970s scaman in certain rural parts of Nevada and Arizona. A narrowed search area, a radius, a real lead. That same week, Sandoval made contact with the family of a man who'd once driven a dark red pickup truck registered near Barstow. The man, Harold Ray Kessler, had died in 2002. No record of criminal activity, but his name had surfaced in another missing person case in 1989, also unsolved, a waitress gone missing after her shift. His son, Eric Kessler, now in his 40s, lived off-grid near the Nevada border. Sandoval requested a warrant. Lisa couldn't sleep. She kept the phone near her at all times, even though it never rang again. She replayed the tape dozens of times, trying to hear something new, a breath, a background noise, a clue. You were always right. And right about what? That Jennifer hadn't left willingly? That someone had taken her? Or something darker, that Jennifer had tried to speak all along, and no one listened? The night before Sandoval left for Nevada, Lisa stood in her hallway, staring at the phone. She lifted the receiver, and for the first time in years, she spoke without waiting for a ring. "I'm still here," she said. "If you're out there, I never stopped looking." The next morning, Officer Sandoval stepped onto the dusty path leading to a rundown wooden structure just past the edge of Amargosa Valley. The place looked abandoned, but someone had been there recently. The door creaked open. and on the floor, half covered in dust and rope fibers, was the sketchbook. Jennifer's initials, pages intact, and scrawled across the final page in fresh ink, "She was never supposed to leave." The cabin door groaned as Officer Sandoval stepped inside. The air was stale dust, wood, and something else, faintly metallic. Light filtered through warped blinds, striping the walls with gold. She moved carefully, gloved, flashlight in hand, sweeping across the room. Everything was still. But it didn't feel abandoned, not completely. The bed was unmade. A half-burnt candle sat beside it. A coffee mug had left a recent ring on the table. Someone had been here, recently. In the center of the room, Jennifer's sketchbook. The cover was cracked with age, the edges frayed, but the initials remained. J.T. in neat cursive. Sandoval picked it up with reverence, heart-pounding. She flipped carefully through the pages. Some were landscapes, others abstract. But in the final third of the book, something shifted. The lines grew frantic. Harsher strokes, symbols, eyes. Over and over again, eyes, watching, floating, bleeding. And then, on the final page, the words written in sharp black ink. "She was never supposed to leave." That same phrase had appeared in the margins of earlier sketches, almost hidden, written sideways, repeated faintly. Sandoval stepped back. She scanned the room again, no sign of struggle. But then she noticed something odd. A section of the far wall had a different hue-like. It had been painted over hastily. She ran her hand across it. Knocked once. Hollow. She followed the sound to a seam in the paneling and found a small metal latch tucked behind a hanging coat. She clicked it open. Behind the false wall was a narrow compartment, barely large enough to crawl through. Dust choked the air. Inside were blankets, an old flashlight, a cracked mirror, and a pair of women's shoes. Faded rose embroidery. Jennifer's shoes. And on the inside of the wooden paneling, carvings, dozens of them. Names, dates, initials, some scratched deep, some recent. Sandoval's radio crackled. "You need to see this," came the voice of her partner outside. They'd found a trail behind the cabin, recent tire tracks, partially covered by dust. A neighbor, miles down the dirt road, had seen a pickup truck drive off around 3 a.m. the night before. Dark red. Nevada plates. The man had been there, and he'd known they were coming. Back in Los Angeles, Lisa sat in her living room with the sketchbook open in her lap. She turned the pages slowly, whispering Jennifer's name, trying to see the world through her sister's eyes. The phone hadn't rung again, but Lisa felt like someone had already spoken. The artwork shifted from beauty to nightmare so gradually it was hard to notice until you looked closely. Early drawings showed trees, street corners, familiar places, but then the walls closed in. Literal walls drawn over and over. Windows with bars, a single door with no handle. One page depicted a room that looked like the inside of the cabin. Jennifer had been there. But for how long? A forensic team began processing the scene. The carvings in the wall revealed something devastating. Not all the names were Jennifer's. Several matched other missing women in the Southwest, ranging from 1,985 to 1,996. None had been found. This cabin had been used before. The working theory emerged. Jennifer had been abducted, held there for years, and may not have been the only one. But then something unexpected happened. The audio analysis from the answering machine came back. The voice on the tape wasn't Jennifer's. The spectral comparison revealed distinct differences in pitch and cadence, but the match was too close to be random. There was only one logical conclusion. The voice belonged to someone related to Jennifer, a sibling, or a child. Lisa felt the floor shift beneath her. A child? It seemed impossible. But Sandoval dug deeper into the medical records from Jennifer's disappearance. She hadn't been to a doctor in her final months. But a coworker recalled Jennifer had fainted in the art room 2 weeks before she vanished. She'd said she was just tired, and then laughed it off. No one had connected it then. But now, was Jennifer pregnant when she disappeared? And if so, what happened to the baby? Sandoval drove back to the cabin, this time with cadaver dogs. They swept the property, searching for signs anything. The dogs alerted near the western fence where the dirt had been recently disturbed. A dig revealed Bones' animal mostly, but buried among them was a child's bracelet. Tiny, plastic, the kind you'd win at a fair. Initial lab results confirmed the disturbing truth: traces of Jennifer's DNA on the bracelet. But that wasn't the end, because buried beneath that same spot was a second phone, a rotary model nearly identical to the one in Lisa's hallway, wrapped in cloth, disconnected, but still whole. Sandoval had it rushed to the lab. Back in L.A., Lisa received another envelope. This one didn't contain a photo. It held a letter, typed, "You think you found her, but she never left. You left her. You all did. She called, but no one heard. Now I speak for her. Tell the lady cop to stop looking, or the next voice she hears won't be on tape." Lisa's fingers trembled. This wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. Jennifer whoever, had sent those photoswas watching everything. Still active, still moving, and still obsessed. Sandoval took no chances. She traced every registered red pickup within 200 miles. One name came up again: Eric Kessler. He had lived off-grid for 2 decades. No credit cards, no phone, but in 2006, a gas station clerk had written a suspicious note in the transaction log. Red truck. Guy bought crayons and diapers. Paid cash. Nervous. There was surveillance tape. The man's face was partially obscured. But when shown the image, Lisa whispered, "He looks like her." DNA testing confirmed what they feared and hoped. The voice on the answering machine? A 99. 8% likelihood of familial match with Jennifer Taylor. The child she'd been carrying had lived. A son. Somehow, whether born in captivity, taken, or traded, he'd survived. And now, nearly 2 decades later, he had found his way to her story. To Lisa. To the phone. But the question remained, why now? And who was keeping him from the truth? Officer Sandoval stood once more in the cabin, flashlight trailing across the carvings in the wall. Some had been scratched fresh. One name repeated again and again: Eli. Jennifer's middle name had been Elise. Could she have named him Eli? Had he grown up behind these walls, raised by the man who took her, taught to forget, taught to believe? If so, then the voice on the tape wasn't a warning. It was a cry, a beginning. They found him just after dawn, in a quiet stretch of Nevada desert, tucked behind a decommissioned ranger station near Beatty. He was sitting on a rock, arms wrapped around his knees, staring out at nothing. The red pickup truck was parked nearby, dust trailing from its tires. The man looked up when they approached. He didn't run, didn't speak, just held out a worn, photograph-cracked, water-stained of a woman with warm brown eyes and a half-smile frozen in time. Jennifer. His name, it turned out, really was Eli. No last name on record. No birth certificate, no school enrollment, nothing to trace him back to the world. It was as if he had been raised in shadow. He was 17 years old. DNA confirmed the truth. Jennifer Taylor was his mother. But the man who raised him, Eric Kessler, wasn't his father. He wasn't even a relative. Just a man with a pattern. A man who had built a cage out of silence. Eli didn't remember much of Jennifer, just fragments. A lullaby hummed softly. Lemon sugar scent. The shape of a woman's silhouette against candlelight. Then, one night, nothing. Eric never spoke of her. He told Eli she had died giving birth. Told him the world outside would hate him. That phones only brought danger. That names had power and silence kept them safe. But Eli remembered the sketchbook, hidden under the floorboards. He used to sneak it out at night, tracing the pictures over and over until he could draw them with his eyes closed. And one day he found the photo. Jennifer, holding him as a baby. Written on the back, in faded ink, Eli, 3 months old, my world. That's when the doubt began. That's when the silence started to break. The cabin became a tomb after that. Eric grew more paranoid. Eli wasn't allowed outside alone. The phone was removed. Locks were added. But at night, when Eric slept, Eli listened. He found the recordings Jennifer had made cassette tapes buried in a rusted tin box. Her voice, preserved in whispers. "If you find this, Eli, know that I never left you. They just wouldn't let me stay. The world is big, bigger than this cabin, bigger than fear. Don't forget who you are." The boy who had never known his name now heard it in her voice. And so, one night, he waited for Eric to fall asleep, walked 6 miles through the dark, and used a payphone to call the only number he had ever seen on Jennifer's sketchbook, Lisa's. He didn't know what he would say, so he said only what he thought she needed to hear. "You were always right. Then he hung up. The rest unraveled like thread. Eric had fled once Eli escaped, realizing his control was breaking. But he left behind the evidence, Jennifer's belongings, the tape recordings, the carvings on the walls. Years of haunting truth buried beneath his delusions. A warrant was issued. He was found 2 states over, living under a fake identity. Arrested without incident. In his truck. Photos, hair clips, receipts, and one final sketchbook, Jennifer's last. The pages were filled with notes. Messages. Plans for escape. Maps of the cabin. Coordinates. She had tried over and over to get out, but she had never made it. The last page of the book was smeared as if drawn in the dark with trembling hands. A woman's face. Her own. Beneath it, 2 words, "Find him." Jennifer's remains were discovered weeks later, buried behind the cabin under a pile of rusted metal sheets. Forensic evidence suggested she died sometime in early 1990, likely from injuries sustained during an attempted escape. She had survived nearly 3 years in captivity, long enough to give birth, long enough to raise her son, long enough to try to fight to leave something behind. Lisa identified her by the necklace. A small gold circle with the letter J. She hadn't worn it the night she vanished. Which meant at some point in those missing years, Jennifer had hoped to be seen again. The funeral was private. No press. No spectacle. Just Lisa, Eli, and a handful of childhood friends who still remembered the girl with the sketchbook and the lemon bars. Eli stood at her grave, holding a stone he had carved himself. It bore no date, no epitaph. Just her name, Jennifer Elise Taylor, and beneath it, the word free. Lisa never disconnected the phone, even after they buried her sister, even after Eli moved in and the calls stopped and the red light on the answering machine finally went dark. She left it there in the hallway, as if Jennifer might speak again, as if silence was something temporary. Eli enrolled in school under his new name, quiet, bright, still drawing. Sometimes Lisa would find him sitting on the porch at 6:13 a.m., staring into the distance. When she asked why, he said, "I don't know. It just feels like that's when she's closest." Zero. Officer Sandoval was promoted later that year. The case had changed her. She still visited Lisa sometimes, still kept a copy of Jennifer's final sketch in her desk drawer. The case had become something more than a file. It was a reminder that silence can hold entire worlds inside it. That sometimes it isn't the scream that saves someone, it's the whisper. Eric Kessler was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He never spoke at trial, never offered a confession, never admitted to anything, even when the evidence buried him. But in his final psychological evaluation, he said one thing: "I kept her because the world didn't deserve her." There was no remorse in his voice. Only possession, only control. But Jennifer's story didn't end in that cabin. It lived on in Eli. And in every stroke of his pencil, every sketch, every dawn he watched from the porch. Lisa still walks the hallway some nights, pausing by the phone. She never picks it up now. Not because she's afraid, but because she no longer has to. Jennifer had finally been heard, and that was enough. But some nights, when the wind shifts and the house settles, she swears she can hear something faint just beneath the hum of electricity. A voice. Soft. "I'm home."